The crystal wine glass shattered in my grip, sending shards and Cabernet across the pristine white tablecloth of my parents' dining room. But I barely noticed the chaos or the gasps around me. All I could focus on was my sister's smirking face as she delivered the news that would change everything. I'm Robin, and until exactly 47 seconds ago, I was the CEO of Pierce Technologies, the company I built from nothing but a dream and maxed out credit cards in my garage 5 years ago. You're just a glorified secretary now, Palmer drawled, adjusting her designer blazer with practiced precision. The board voted unanimously this morning. I'm sure you understand. It's just business. Just business. The words echoed in my head as I watched drops of wine spread across the tablecloth like bloodstains. My blood, my company, my life's work, all stolen by my own sister. Robin, dear, you're bleeding, my mother Hazel said softly, reaching for my hand, where a small shard of glass had nicked my palm. I pulled away. I'm fine. Well, this is certainly unexpected, my father Dean commented, dabbing his mouth with his napkin. Though perhaps it's for the best. Palmer has more experience with... Experience? I couldn't hold back my laugh. She's never built anything in her life except excuses. Palmer's smile didn't waver. That's exactly the kind of emotional response that convinced the board you weren't ready for this level of responsibility. A CEO needs to be calculated, controlled. Like systematically lying to steal your sister's company? I shot back. Robin, my father warned, his tone sharp, your sister is trying to help. The company needs stable leadership. The company was growing at 300% annually under my leadership, and now it will grow even more, Palmer interrupted smoothly. In fact, I'm already in talks with Vertex Industries about an acquisition that will put us on the global map. My stomach dropped. Vertex Industries, our biggest competitor. Everything I'd built would be stripped for parts and absorbed into their corporate machine. You can't do this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I already have. Palmer stood, straightening her skirt. The papers are signed. The press release goes out tomorrow morning. I suggest you take some time off, clear your head. Maybe travel a bit. You can afford it now, thanks to the generous severance package I arranged. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see Adrian, my legal advisor and oldest friend, who had been silently watching the drama unfold. His expression told me everything I needed to know. This was real, this was happening, and it had been meticulously planned. I should go, I managed to say, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. Robin, please stay for dessert, my mother pleaded. We hardly ever have the whole family together anymore. Huh, family! I looked around the table, at my father's disapproving frown, my mother's worried eyes, and Palmer's triumphant smile. I don't see any family here. As I walked toward the door, Palmer called out, Don't forget to turn in your key card on Monday. Security will escort you to clear out your office. I stopped but didn't turn around. You know what the funny thing is, Palmer? You've always been so desperate to prove you're better than me that you never stopped to actually learn from me. And that's going to be your biggest mistake. Is that a threat? She sounded amused. No, I said, finally turning to meet her eyes. It's a promise. Adrian followed me out to my car, grabbing my arm before I could get in. Robin, wait, there's something you need to know about the patents. Not now. I cut him off, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Tomorrow, my place. 8 a.m. Bring everything you have. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. What are you going to do? I thought about Palmer's smug face, about my father's dismissal, about everything I'd sacrificed to build my company. A calm clarity settled over me as I replied, I'm going to take back what's mine. And I'm going to make sure my sister never forgets what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. As I drove away from my parents' house, I could still see Palmer standing at the window, raising her wine glass in a mock toast. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd finally beaten her little sister at something. She had no idea what was coming. I spent the night going through old photos, trying to pinpoint exactly when Palmer's smile had turned from sisterly to sinister. The morning light was creeping through my windows when I found it, a picture from my company's launch party 3 years ago. Palmer standing slightly behind me, her eyes fixed not on the camera, but on my champagne glass, watching as I celebrated my first major contract. The doorbell jolted me from my thoughts. Adrian arrived exactly at 8 a.m., carrying a thick folder and wearing the expression I'd seen countless times before major negotiations. "Coffee's ready," I said, leading him to my kitchen island. "Tell me everything." He spread out documents across the granite surface. "Palmer's been planning this for months. She approached board members individually, built relationships, planted seeds of doubt about your leadership." "Of course she did." I poured coffee into 2 mugs. "She's always been good at making people see what she wants them to see." But here's what she missed. Adrian pulled out a specific document, his finger tapping on a highlighted section. "The core patents. They're still in your name personally, not the company's." My phone buzzed. A text from Vada. "Just saw the press release. WTF, I'm coming over." "Show me," I told Adrian, ignoring the message for now. He walked me through the technical details, but my mind was already racing ahead. Palmer would need those patents for the Vertex acquisition. She'd overlooked something so basic, so fundamental, just like she always did. The doorbell rang again. Vada burst in before I could answer, still wearing her hospital scrubs from her night shift. "I'm going to kill her," she announced, dropping her bag on the counter. "Just say the word, Robin. I know how to make it look like natural causes." Despite everything, I laughed. Vada had been my best friend since we were kids, long before Palmer had perfected her act as the perfect daughter. "No murder necessary," Adrian said, sliding a document toward Vada. "We have something better." "The patents," I explained. "She can't sell what she doesn't own." Vada's eyes lit up. "So you can block the acquisition?" "I could," I said slowly, an idea forming. "But that's not enough. I want her to feel what it's like to have everything pulled out from under her, just like she did to me." My phone buzzed again, Palmer's name flashing on the screen. I put it on speaker. "Good morning, sis." Her voice dripped with false sweetness. "Just wanted to remind you about clearing out your office today. I've scheduled a press conference for noon to announce some exciting changes." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, matching her tone. "By the way, how's Edgar?" A pause. "Edgar who?" "Edgar Green, CEO of Vertex. You mentioned the acquisition last night." "That's confidential information," Palmer said, her voice tightening. "Not for long, right? Noon press conference and all." I winked at Vada, who was covering her mouth to hold back laughter. "See you there, sis." I hung up and turned to Adrian. "How quickly can you set up a meeting with Edgar?" He was already typing on his phone. "He's been trying to connect with you for months. I'm sure he'd clear his schedule." "Perfect." I grabbed my laptop. "Vada, I need you to help me dig up everything you remember about Palmer's business successes over the past 10 years. Every job she suddenly left. Every project that mysteriously fell apart after she took credit." "Oh, honey," Vada grinned, pulling up a chair. "I've been keeping receipts since high school, when she tried to take credit for my science project." For the next hour, we built a timeline. A pattern emerged. Palmer hadn't just stolen my company. She'd made a career out of taking credit for other people's work, always moving on before the truth came out. "Got it," Adrian announced, looking up from his phone. "Edgar can meet us at 10:30. That gives us just enough time before Palmer's press conference." I stood up, straightening my jacket. Time to remind my sister of an important lesson she never learned. Karma doesn't send warning texts. "What's the plan?" Vada asked, gathering her things. "Palmer wants to play chess?" I smiled, thinking of all those childhood games where she'd claimed victory by changing the rules. "Let's show her what happens when you actually know how to play." As we headed out, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. For the first time since last night's dinner, I recognized myself again. Palmer had taken my company, but she'd forgotten something crucial. She wasn't the only one who'd learned to be calculated and controlled. The difference was, I'd learned it by building something real. She'd learned it by destroying things. Time to show her the difference. Edgar's office occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown skyscraper, exactly the kind of corporate excess I'd always avoided at Pierce Technologies. The irony wasn't lost on me that I now needed his help. "Robin!" He greeted me with a firm handshake. "I have to admit, I was surprised to get your call, especially given this morning's news. Let me guess. Palmer already reached out about the acquisition." He gestured for us to sit. "She did. Rather aggressively, I might add. Mentioned something about revolutionary patents that would change the industry." "Interesting." I placed a folder on his desk. "Would those be these patents?" Edgar flipped through the documents, his eyebrows rising. "These are registered to you personally. 5 years ago," I said, watching his expression carefully. "When I was working out of my garage, surviving on ramen and energy drinks." "Tell him about the prototype," Adrian prompted. I pulled out my phone, showing Edgar a video from those early days. There I was, exhausted but excited, demonstrating the first working version of our security software. "Palmer wasn't there," I said quietly. "She was too busy climbing the corporate ladder at other companies. But now she wants to sell you something she doesn't own and doesn't understand." Edgar leaned back, studying me. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want to make you a better offer." I met his gaze steadily. "One that doesn't involve my sister's smoke and mirrors." "I'm listening." For the next 20 minutes, I laid out my proposal. A genuine partnership instead of an acquisition, combining Vertex's market reach with my innovation. By the time I finished, Edgar was nodding slowly. "This could work," he said, "but your sister—" "Will be at her press conference in exactly 1 hour," I completed his thought. "Announcing an acquisition that can't happen without my patents." A smile tugged at Edgar's lips. "You want me there?" "Front row," he checked his watch. "I'll need to move some meetings." "Trust me," I stood up. "You don't want to miss this." As we left Vertex's building, Vada called. "Robin, you need to see this. Palmer's giving interviews, talking about how she saved the company from your mismanagement." My hands tightened on my steering wheel. "Send me everything." "There's more," Vada continued. "Your father's with her, backing up her story. They're painting you as some naive kid who got lucky with one idea." The familiar anger bubbled up, but this time it felt different. Cleaner, more focused. "Remember that summer internship Palmer had at Global Tech?" I asked. "The one that mysteriously ended after 3 months?" "Yeah, she claimed she left for a better opportunity." "Call your cousin who works there. Find out what really happened." Vada's voice turned gleeful. "On it." We pulled into the Pierce Technologies parking lot with 30 minutes to spare. Security tried to stop me at the entrance, but Adrian stepped forward with a court order he'd prepared overnight. My personal office might be off limits, but the conference room where Palmer would make her announcement was still legally accessible to shareholders, and I still owned 30% of the company. "Ms. Pierce," reporters were already gathering in the lobby. "Can you comment on your sister's takeover?" "Actually," I smiled, "I'm saving my comments for the press conference. You won't want to miss it." Palmer was already at the podium when we entered, doing sound checks. She faltered mid-sentence when she saw me, but quickly recovered. "Robin," she said into the microphone, her voice echoing through the room. "This is a private event." "No," I corrected her, taking a seat in the front row. "This is a shareholder event, and I'm still a shareholder." Her eyes narrowed when she saw Edgar enter behind me. "What is he doing here?" "I invited him," I said sweetly. "We had the most interesting meeting this morning. Didn't we, Edgar?" Palmer's perfectly composed facade cracked, just for a second. She turned to our father, who had just walked in, panic flickering across her face. "Daddy," she started, but he was staring at Edgar too, recognition and confusion warring in his expression. "The press conference will begin in 5 minutes," an assistant announced. I settled back in my chair, watching Palmer frantically whisper with her team, occasionally shooting worried glances my way. She had no idea what was coming, but she knew something was wrong. just like all those times in our childhood when her lies were about to unravel. You sure about this? Adrian whispered. I thought about all the nights I'd spent building my company, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the times Palmer had tried to diminish my achievements. Absolutely, I replied. It's time for everyone to see who my sister really is. The cameras started rolling. Palmer stepped up to the podium, camera flashes illuminating her practiced smile. Good afternoon, everyone. Today marks an exciting new chapter for Pierce Technologies. I watched her scan the crowd, faltering slightly when she noticed more unfamiliar faces than expected. Vada had been busy. There were reporters from every major tech publication, not just the friendly local press Palmer had invited. As you know, the board has appointed me as CEO, she continued, and I'm thrilled to announce that we're entering final negotiations for a landmark acquisition by Vertex Industries. The reporter's hands shot up immediately. Palmer pointed to one in the front row. Ms. Pierce, can you address rumors that the core patents are still registered to your sister? Palmer's smile tightened. Those are merely administrative details that will be resolved during the transition. Actually, Edgar stood up, straightening his tie. I'd like to address that point. The color drained from Palmer's face. This isn't the appropriate time. On the contrary, Edgar's voice carried authority that commanded attention. As CEO of Vertex Industries, I think this is exactly the time to clarify that we have no intention of acquiring Pierce Technologies under its current leadership. The room erupted in murmurs. Cameras swiveled between Palmer, Edgar, and me. There seems to be some confusion. Palmer attempted to regain control. We had preliminary discussions. We did, Edgar agreed. And during those discussions, you claimed to have full rights to proprietary technology that, as it turns out, you don't own. My father stood up abruptly. This is outrageous. Palmer has been nothing but a fraud? Vada's voice cut through the chaos as she strode in, waving a folder. I have statements from 3 former employers detailing how Palmer took credit for other people's work, manipulated data, and left before her deceptions could be exposed. Palmer gripped the podium. These are baseless accusations. Including, Vada continued, documentation from Global Tech about your mysterious departure after attempting to steal proprietary information. The reporters were scribbling frantically now, cameras clicking nonstop. I finally spoke up, rising from my seat. What everyone's wondering is, Palmer, have you ever actually created anything yourself? She turned to me, desperation replacing her usual smugness. You're just jealous because I'm better at running this company. Running it into the ground, you mean? I pulled out my phone, projecting quarterly reports onto the screen behind her. In the weeks since you took control, our stock has dropped 15%. 3 major clients have suspended their contracts pending review. I can fix that. With what? I challenged. The patents you don't own? The technology you don't understand? The trust you never earned? Our father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Robin, stop this immediately. No, Dad. For once you're going to listen. I turned to face him directly. You always believed Palmer's version of events. Did you ever once ask to see my work? To understand what I built? The silence was deafening. I have an announcement of my own, I continued, addressing the reporters. Vertex Industries and I have reached an agreement. Not for an acquisition, but for a strategic partnership that will expand our reach while maintaining our independence. Edgar nodded in confirmation as cameras swung toward him. Furthermore, I added, given recent revelations about corporate espionage and fraud, I've instructed my legal team to pursue all available remedies to protect our intellectual property and shareholders' interests. Adrian stood, distributing documents to the press, including evidence of insider trading and board manipulation. Palmer's facade finally crumbled completely. You can't do this. Daddy, tell her she can't do this. But our father was staring at the documents in his hands, seeing for the first time the real numbers, the real achievements, and the real fraud. The board meeting, he said slowly, where you presented Robin's performance as failing, These numbers were altered. I did it for us. Palmer's voice cracked. For the family name. The family name? I laughed. The only thing you've done to our family name is prove exactly how far you'd go to steal what you couldn't earn. Security entered the room. Not Palmer's security, but Adrian's team, armed with court orders and evidence preservation notices. Ms. Pierce, one of them addressed Palmer, we need you to step away from the company computers and surrender your devices. As they led her away from the podium, Palmer turned to me one last time. You've ruined everything. Huh, no! I corrected her, watching as reporters rushed to file their stories. I've just shown everyone the truth. You ruined everything yourself. The cameras kept rolling as Palmer was escorted out, capturing every second of her downfall for the world to see. But I wasn't watching her anymore. I was looking at my father's face, seeing the moment he finally realized which daughter he should have believed all along. The aftermath of Palmer's exposure hit our family like a tornado. My mother insisted on hosting a small family dinner to sort things out. But as I pulled up to their house 3 days later, I knew this wouldn't be a peaceful meal. Your sister is devastated, my mother said the moment I walked in, wringing her hands. She hasn't left her apartment since she got caught, I finished, setting down the wine bottle I'd brought. That's usually what happens when fraud is exposed, Mom. My father emerged from his study, looking older than I'd ever seen him. The board called an emergency meeting tomorrow. They're voting to reinstate you as CEO. I know. I called the meeting. He nodded slowly. The press is having a field day. Our name is everywhere. Would you prefer they didn't report on Palmer's crimes? I asked, keeping my voice level. Should we have kept it quiet, like all the other times she's done something like this? The doorbell rang. My mother rushed to answer it, probably grateful for the interruption. To everyone's surprise, it was Veda. Sorry I'm late, she announced, breezing in. Traffic was horrible. Oh, and Palmer's not coming. She sent this instead. She handed my mother an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note that my mother read aloud, her voice trembling. I can't face you all after what Robin did to me. She's destroyed everything I worked for. I hope you're happy now, sis. Love, Palmer. What she worked for? Vada scoffed. You mean what she stole? Vada, my mother pleaded. Please, she's still family. Family? I couldn't hold back anymore. Where was this concern for family when she was systematically destroying my company? When she was lying to the board? When she was trying to sell patents she didn't own? My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough. Both of you succeeded in business. Why couldn't you just— Both of us, I interrupted. Dad, I built something real. Palmer built a house of cards by taking credit for other people's work. How are you still not seeing the difference? The doorbell rang again. This time it was Adrian, carrying a thick folder. Sorry to interrupt dinner, he said, though we hadn't even started. But Robin, you need to see this. We found something in Palmer's company email. He spread out documents on the dining room table, right over my mother's best tablecloth. Emails, spreadsheets, and bank statements created a paper trail that made my stomach turn. She was embezzling, Adrian explained, setting up fake vendor accounts, siphoning money into offshore accounts. She's been doing it for years, at every company she worked for. My mother sank into a chair. That's not possible. Palmer would never— It's all here, Mrs. Pierce, Adrian said gently. The evidence is irrefutable. My father picked up one of the bank statements, his hands shaking slightly. These transfers, they started right after she joined her first company, right after college. When you were telling everyone how proud you were that she'd landed such a prestigious position, I reminded him, while telling me I was wasting my time with my little startup. The silence that followed was deafening. I should have seen it, my father finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. All those jobs she suddenly left, the projects that never quite materialized, the explanations that never quite made sense. We all should have seen it, my mother added, tears in her eyes. Robin, I'm so— The doorbell rang a third time. Through the window, I could see police cars. That would be the fraud division, Adrian explained. They have some questions about those offshore accounts. My mother started to rise. I should call Palmer, Warner. Mom, I caught her arm. Stop protecting her. She needs to face the consequences of her actions. Finally. We watched through the window as police cars pulled away from our house, heading toward Palmer's apartment. My father stood beside me, looking lost. I always thought. He started, then stopped. I always believed. I know, Dad, I said softly. You believed what you wanted to believe. We all do sometimes. Vada started gathering the documents. The board meeting's at 9 tomorrow. We should get some rest. As we prepared to leave, my father caught my arm. Robin, wait. I was wrong. About everything. About you. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And saw something I'd never seen before. Respect. I know, I said simply. But it's not me you need to worry about now. Palmer's going to need help. Real help, not enablers. As I drove home that night, I thought about karma, about justice, about family. Palmer had wanted so desperately to be seen as successful that she'd forgotten the most important part. Earning it. Tomorrow, I'd take back my company. But tonight, I'd already reclaimed something more valuable, the truth. The boardroom felt different as I walked in the next morning. Gone was the tension from last week's hostile takeover. Instead, there was an air of embarrassed contrition as board members avoided meeting my eyes. Before we begin, Marcus, the board chairman, cleared his throat. I believe we owe you an apology, Robin. Save it, I said, setting down my coffee. We all got played by Palmer. The question is, what are we going to do about it? The door burst open, and Palmer strode in, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her usually perfect hair disheveled. 2 police officers followed close behind. She insisted on attending, one officer explained, given that she's still technically CEO until this meeting concludes. You think you've won, don't you? Palmer spat, glaring at me. You think exposing me makes you better? Ms. Pierce, Marcus intervened, given the circumstances. Oh, shut up, Marcus, Palmer snapped. You were happy enough to believe my lies last week. Called me visionary, remember? Adrian stepped forward, laptop in hand. Should I play the security footage from your office, the one showing you shredding documents at 3 a.m. this morning? Palmer's face went white. You were monitoring me? Standard corporate security, I explained. Something you'd know if you'd actually built a company instead of just stealing one. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Adrian connected his laptop to the projector. The footage showed Palmer frantically feeding papers into a shredder, occasionally glancing over her shoulder. Fortunately, Adrian continued, our IT team recovered the deleted files from your computer. Would you like to explain the shell companies, the fake invoices, the offshore accounts? I can explain everything. Palmer's voice took on the smooth, confident tone she'd perfected over years of deception. This is all a misunderstanding. Stop! I cut her off. Just stop! For once in your life, Palmer, tell the truth. She turned to me, and for a moment, I saw something crack in her carefully constructed facade. The truth? You want the truth? Fine. I was better at this than you. I played the game better. I knew how to make people see what I wanted them to see. That's not being better, I said quietly. That's just being a better liar. Same thing in business, she sneered. No, Marcus spoke up, surprising everyone. It's not. And that's what we failed to see. Robin built something real. You built an illusion. The police officer stepped forward. Ms. Pierce, we need to continue our discussion at the station. Wait. Palmer held up her hand, reaching into her bag. I have something you all need to see first. She pulled out a USB drive. Insurance, you might say. Every corrupt deal this board has ever made. Every corner cut. Every regulation ignored. If I'm going down, I'm not going alone. The room went silent. Then I started laughing. What's so funny? Palmer demanded. You really don't get it, do you? I shook my head. The first thing I did when I started this company was set up ethical business practices. triple-checked by external auditors, everything transparent, everything by the book. That's impossible, Palmer whispered. Nobody actually runs a clean business? I finished for her. That's what you told yourself to justify everything you did, isn't it? That everyone cheats, everyone lies, so it's okay if you do too? The police officers moved forward again, this time with handcuffs. This isn't fair, Palmer's voice cracked as they secured her wrists. I was just playing the game the way everyone else does. No, I corrected her. You were playing the game the way you convinced yourself everyone else does. There's a difference. As they led her out, she turned back one last time. They'll never trust you now, not after what I did with your company's name. I looked around the boardroom, at the people who'd believed her lies, who'd failed to see through her deception. But I also saw something else, an opportunity to rebuild, this time with everyone's eyes wide open. Actually, I said, they'll trust us more, because now they know exactly what real leadership looks like compared to fake success. The door closed behind Palmer for the last time. Marcus cleared his throat again. Well, he said, I believe we have a vote to take. One by one, the board members raised their hands. The vote was unanimous, just like it had been when they'd given the company to Palmer. But this time, they were voting for substance over style, truth over deception. As I reclaimed my seat at the head of the table, I thought about what Palmer had said about playing the game. She never understood that real success isn't a game at all. It's a responsibility. 6 weeks after Palmer's arrest, I stood on stage at the annual Tech Innovation Summit, preparing to announce our partnership with Vertex Industries. The audience was packed, not just with industry leaders, but with reporters still hungry for details about the scandal that had rocked the tech world. Ready for this? Edgar asked, adjusting his microphone. Born ready, I replied, scanning the crowd. My parents were in the front row, my father looking uncomfortable in his suit, my mother clutching her purse like a lifeline. They'd attended Palmer's bail hearing yesterday. She hadn't looked at them once. Ladies and gentlemen, the moderator began. Please welcome Robin, CEO of Pierce Technologies, and Edgar, CEO of Vertex Industries, to discuss their groundbreaking new partnership. The applause was polite but cautious. Everyone was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Thank you, I stepped up to the podium. Before we discuss the future, I want to address the past. The room went silent. 6 weeks ago, my company was nearly destroyed by fraud and deception. Many of you probably read about it, tweeted about it, maybe even celebrated watching a successful woman fall from grace. Cameras clicked rapidly. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here because while one person tried to steal success, hundreds of brilliant engineers, developers, and innovators were actually building it, and they deserve to have their work recognized. I gestured to the screen behind me, where our latest project appeared, a revolutionary security system that would change how companies protected their data. This is what real innovation looks like, I continued. Not backdoor deals or stolen patents, but actual creation. And today, with Vertex Industries, we're taking it global. Edgar stepped forward, and together we outlined the partnership that would combine our technologies. The audience leaned forward, phones forgotten, as they realized this wasn't just damage control, this was something new. Then came the questions. How can investors trust Pierce Technologies after recent events? Because we're not hiding anything, I answered. Every patent, every line of code, every development stage is documented and verified. Transparency isn't just a buzzword for us anymore. It's our foundation. And Vertex isn't concerned about the association? Edgar took that one. We didn't partner with Pierce Technologies despite recent events. We partnered with them because of how they handled those events. Integrity under pressure reveals character. A hand rose from the middle row. Your sister's trial starts next month. How will that affect operations? I saw my mother flinch, but I kept my voice steady. Palmer's actions were her own. She'll face the consequences of those actions. Meanwhile, we'll keep building, creating, and proving that real success doesn't need deception to thrive. After the presentation, Vada found me backstage. "That was amazing!" She hugged me. "And guess what? 3 more companies have come forward about Palmer's previous scams. The prosecutor says it's looking at serious time." "Robin," my father's voice interrupted us. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, my mother beside him. "That was impressive." "Thanks, Dad." "I visited Palmer this morning," my mother said softly. "She wanted me to give you this." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 2 words. "I'm sorry." "Too little, too late?" Vada asked, reading over my shoulder. "Maybe," I said, folding the note. "But it's a start." Adrian burst in, waving his phone. "Stock's up 30% since the announcement. The partnership tweets are trending, and," he grinned, "Edgar just signed the final contracts." My father cleared his throat. "Robin, I know I never said this before, but I'm proud of you. Not just for handling this crisis, but for building something real in the first place." "We both are," my mother added, tears in her eyes. "Thanks," I said, surprised by how much their words still meant to me. "But I'm not done building yet." The door opened again. Edgar, followed by a stream of reporters. "Ready to show them the prototype?" he asked. I looked around at my support system. Vada's fierce loyalty, Adrian's steady guidance, my parents' belated but sincere pride, and Edgar's professional respect. Palmer had tried to take everything from me, but she'd inadvertently given me something instead. The chance to prove what real leadership looked like. "Let's do this," I said, heading back toward the stage. Behind me, I heard a reporter ask my father, "What's it like having one daughter in jail and another revolutionizing the industry?" "It's like watching 2 different paths," he replied. "One built on lies, the other built on work. I just wish I'd seen the difference sooner." I smiled to myself as I stepped into the spotlight. Palmer had always wanted to be seen as successful. I just wanted to build something that mattered. Turned out, that made all the difference. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters as I made my way inside. Palmer's sentencing hearing had drawn media attention from across the country. Everyone wanted to see the final chapter of the tech world's biggest scandal. "Ready?" Vada squeezed my hand as we found seats in the courtroom. "As I'll ever be." Palmer sat at the defendant's table, wearing a plain navy suit instead of her usual designer clothes. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without her carefully constructed facade. The judge entered, and we all rose. As we sat back down, Palmer turned slightly, catching my eye for the first time since her arrest. There was something different in her expression, not the anger or defiance I'd expected, but something that looked almost like acceptance. "Before I deliver the sentence," the judge began, "would the defendant like to make a statement?" Palmer stood slowly. "Yes, Your Honor." She turned to face the courtroom, her hands trembling slightly as she held her prepared notes. "I've spent my whole life trying to prove I was special," she began. "Better. More successful. But everything I claimed to achieve was built on lies. The only person in my family who actually built something real was my sister. And I tried to steal that from her, too." My mother stifled a sob from the row behind me. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Palmer continued. "I'm not even asking for leniency. I'm just finally telling the truth. I was wrong about everything, and I'm sorry." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Ms. Pierce, your crimes show a pattern of deliberate fraud spanning multiple years and companies. The court sentences you to 7 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution to all affected parties." As the gavel fell, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Not satisfaction or triumph, but something more complicated. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. "Robin, how do you feel about the sentence? Will Pierce Technologies pursue additional civil charges?" I raised my hand for quiet. "The only statement I'm making today is this. Success built on lies will always collapse. Real achievement takes work, integrity, and time. My sister chose shortcuts. I chose to build. That's all there is to say." My father approached as the reporters dispersed. Palmer asked to see you, before they take her to prison. I hesitated, then nodded. The guard led me to a small conference room where Palmer waited, handcuffed. I didn't think you'd come, she said. Neither did I. I watched your partnership announcement with Vertex, she said quietly. It was brilliant. Everything I pretended to be, you actually are. It's not about being brilliant, Palmer. It's about doing the work. I know, now. She looked down at her hands. I kept every article about you, every success, every innovation. I told myself I was studying the competition, but really, I was proud of you, even while I was trying to destroy you. That doesn't make it better. No, she agreed. Nothing makes it better. But maybe in 5 years, I can try to build something real too. The honest way. The guard stepped in. Time's up. I stood to leave, then paused. Palmer, that prototype you tried to steal? It wasn't even our best work. We've developed something 10 times better since then. She smiled sadly. Of course you have. That's what real innovators do. Outside, Vada, Adrian, and Edgar waited with my parents. The market's responding well to the sentencing, Adrian reported. Investors appreciate closure. And our new security system launches next week, Edgar added. Pre-orders are through the roof. My mother touched my arm. Are you okay? I looked at my unlikely support system, my best friend who never doubted me, my lawyer who fought for justice, my business partner who valued integrity, and my parents who finally saw the truth. You know what? I said. I really am. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Board meeting in an hour. Big announcement. Back to work? Vada asked. Always. I smiled. Real success doesn't build itself. As we walked to our cars, I thought about Palmer's words about building something real. She'd chosen the illusion of success over the work of achievement, and that choice had cost her everything. But standing here, with my company thriving, my innovations changing the industry, and my integrity intact, I realized something important. Revenge hadn't driven Palmer's downfall. Truth had. And truth, unlike revenge, builds something lasting. Ready to change the world? Edgar asked as we headed toward the office. I thought about all the ideas still waiting to be developed, all the innovations yet to be created, all the real work ahead. Always ready, I replied. Let's build something that matters, because that's what real leaders do.
Life's never handed me anything on a silver platter. My name's Anna, and by the time I was 6, both my folks had passed, leaving me in the care of my grandma. She was tough as nails, but with a heart of gold. We didn't have much, but she made damn sure I never felt wanting for love. Education? Well, that was a luxury we couldn't afford. I learned to read and write, but school was a dream that ended when I had to start working to help out. I ended up waitressing at a diner downtown, a place where the tips were as meager as the hopes of ever getting out of there. But it paid the bills, or at least some of them, and it kept me on my feet. That's where I met James. He walked in one rainy afternoon, all drenched and looking like something out of a magazine with his fancy suit and that lost look on his face. Can I get a coffee, black, and maybe a slice of your best pie? He asked, shaking off the rain. Sure thing, coming right up, I replied, trying not to show how his smile made my heart skip a beat. James was from a different world, one where people didn't worry about their next meal or whether they could afford the rent. We got to talking, him with his curious questions about my life, and me, well, I was just being my straight-up self. So, what's a guy like you doing in a dive like this? I couldn't help but ask. Just passing through, looking for a bit of real life, I guess. He chuckled, that smile never leaving his face. Real life, huh? Spend a day in my shoes, you'll get more real life than you bargained for. I joked back, not really expecting him to understand. But he surprised me. He kept coming back, not just for the coffee, but for the conversations. We talked about everything and nothing, and somewhere along the line, I started to fall for him. Hard. James introduced me to his world, one I never knew existed. Fancy dinners, parties where people talked about things I barely understood, and yet, he never made me feel out of place. He was different, kind, and genuinely interested in me, not just my story. Then there was Eleanor, James's mother. The first time I met her, I knew she was sizing me up, her eyes sharp, missing nothing. "So, you're the girl who's caught my son's attention," she said, her voice cool, her gaze even colder. "Yeah, guess I am," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Well," was all she said, turning her attention back to James as if I was no longer there. It was clear from the get-go she didn't approve of me. I was too simple, too uneducated, too everything she didn't want for her son. Eleanor's disdain wasn't the silent type. It was loud, clear, and made its presence felt every single time she walked into a room. If there was one thing I learned quickly after marrying James, it was that his mother, Eleanor, had an opinion on everything. And she wasn't shy about letting you know exactly what she thought, especially if it involved me. Living under the shadow of her disdain was like walking on eggshells, only the eggshells were made of glass, and I was barefoot. Every dinner, every family gathering, she had a way of making her disapproval known, her words sharp enough to cut through the thickest skin. One evening, James and I invited her over for dinner, a simple affair. I had spent the day cooking, trying to make everything perfect, hoping, foolishly, maybe, that I could win her over with my culinary skills. The moment she stepped through the door, I knew it was going to be a long night. "Oh, you decided to cook, Anna? How quaint," she remarked, her voice dripping with condescension as she glanced around our modest living room. "Yeah, thought we'd have a nice family dinner." "Sit down, make yourself comfortable," I replied, forcing a smile, trying to keep the peace for James's sake. James, bless him, tried to smooth things over. "Mom, Anna's been working hard on this meal. Let's just enjoy the evening, okay?" Dinner was a battlefield. With every dish I served, Eleanor had a comment. "This is interesting, Anna. Not what I would have chosen, but I suppose it's edible." I clenched my jaw, counting to 10 in my head. "Glad you think so. Tried something new tonight." James shot me a sympathetic look, his way of saying, "Just ignore her." But ignoring Eleanor was like trying to ignore a hurricane in your living room. The real kicker came when we were talking about Lily's upcoming school year. "I've been looking into schools for Lily," Eleanor began, her tone suggesting she had already made decisions. "The local public school simply won't do. A girl of her potential needs the best education we can provide." I felt my hackles rise. "James and I have been discussing schools. We think the local school is just fine." Eleanor turned her sharp gaze on me. "Anna, with all due respect, what do you know about education? Your background doesn't exactly scream expertise in the matter." That stung. I could feel James tense up beside me, but before he could say anything, I jumped in. "My background might not be fancy, Eleanor, but I know plenty about making the best out of what you've got. Lily will be fine." The rest of the evening passed in tense silence. After Eleanor left, James tried to apologize. "Anna, I'm sorry. She's just set in her ways." "Yeah, I've noticed," I interrupted, not wanting to hear excuses for her behavior. It wasn't just the dinners or the snide remarks about my cooking or our home. It was the way she treated me, like I was an inconvenience, a mistake her son had made. But I wasn't about to let her walk all over me. I had faced tougher things in my life than Eleanor's disdain. What bothered me most was the way she talked about Lily, as if I had no say in my daughter's upbringing. The thought of her undermining me with Lily, teaching her to look down on where she came from, made my blood boil. James was caught in the middle, I knew that. He loved his mother, but he loved me and Lily too. "We'll figure this out, Anna. I promise," he said, pulling me into a hug. Eleanor's idea of music lessons for Lily felt more like a military operation than anything resembling fun. She'd march into our home, piano books in hand, a stern look on her face that would make a drill sergeant proud. Lily, bless her heart, tried to look excited, but I could see the dread in her eyes. It broke my heart. One afternoon, after another one of these so-called lessons, Lily came to me, her little face scrunched up in distress. "Mommy, do I have to keep doing piano with Grandma? She gets mad when I mess up. It's not fun." I knelt down, pulling her into a hug. "Hey, it's okay. You don't have to do anything that makes you unhappy. Let me talk to Grandma, okay?" Lily nodded, wiping away a tear. It was the last straw. I decided it was time for a showdown with Eleanor. That evening, when Eleanor was about to leave, I stopped her at the door. "Eleanor, we need to talk about these music lessons," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Oh? What about them?" she replied, her tone icy, as if she already knew where this was going. "Lily's not happy. She's stressed and upset after every lesson. I thought these were supposed to be fun for her." Eleanor scoffed. "Fun? Music isn't about fun, Anna. It's about discipline, about learning to appreciate the finer things in life. Something you'd know nothing about." I felt my cheeks flush with anger. "Listen, I appreciate you wanting to teach Lily, but not like this. Not at the cost of her happiness." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "And what do you suggest? Letting her quit? That's the problem with your generation. Too quick to give up. No wonder you ended up where you are." That stung. More than I wanted to admit. It's not about giving up. It's about not forcing her to do something she hates. There's a difference. Eleanor shook her head, dismissive. "I won't stand by and watch my granddaughter waste her potential. If you're not interested in her future, I certainly am." That night, after Lily went to bed, I sat down with James. "We need to talk about Eleanor and these piano lessons," I started, trying to keep my voice even. James looked up, his expression wary. "What about them?" "Lily's miserable, James. She's scared of making mistakes because your mom's too hard on her. She's losing her love for music." James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mom just wants what's best for Lily. You know how she is with perfection." I felt my frustration rise. But at what cost? Our daughter's happiness? There was a long silence before James spoke again. "I'll talk to Mom. But Anna, you know how she is. She's set in her ways. Maybe we just give it a bit more time?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. More time? "James, our daughter is unhappy." He didn't meet my gaze. "I know, but Mom's heart is in the right place. Let's not make a big deal out of this, okay? We'll work it out. Just give it some time." The conversation ended there, but the issue didn't. James did talk to Eleanor, or so he said, but nothing changed. If anything, the lessons became more frequent, as if Eleanor was doubling down in the face of my concerns. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate music, it was the way Eleanor lorded over Lily, pressing her own brand of perfection onto her, that rubbed me the wrong way. But Lily was a trooper, and somehow, she managed to find joy in the keys, despite her grandmother's heavy-handed teachings. As our wedding anniversary approached, James and I decided to throw a party. Nothing too fancy, just a gathering of close friends and family to celebrate another year of us. The planning was going smoothly until Eleanor threw us a curveball. "I've arranged for a special performance," she announced one evening, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Lily and I will be playing a duet. You'll need to rent a stage and a piano." James and I exchanged a look. "A piano?" he echoed, clearly taken aback. "Yes, James. And make sure it's a grand piano. We'll be playing arpeggios, something Anna here might not be familiar with," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with that familiar condescension. I felt my cheeks burn, not from embarrassment, but from anger. The nerve of her, to assume I didn't know what arpeggios were. My grandmother had made sure I was as comfortable with Bach and Beethoven as I was with a frying pan and spatula. But I'd kept my musical skills a secret, a piece of me that I cherished privately, away from judgmental eyes. Not even James knew. But I swallowed my pride and bit back the sharp retort on the tip of my tongue. This wasn't about me or Eleanor. This was about Lily, and if playing this duet made her happy, then I'd move heaven and earth to make it happen. Sure, Eleanor. We'll make sure there's a stage and a piano, I said, my voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside me. Eleanor looked satisfied, her smile sharp as a knife. Good. It'll be educational for you, Anna. A chance to see what real music sounds like. I forced a smile, imagining the look on her face if I sat down at that piano and let loose with a Chopin nocturne or a Debussy prelude. But this wasn't the time for showing off. This was about giving Lily a moment in the spotlight, away from the shadow of her grandmother's expectations. James, bless him, was clueless about the tension. It'll be great, babe. Lily's excited about it, he said later, wrapping an arm around me. I nodded, leaning into his embrace. Yeah, it'll be something all right. As the day of the party drew closer, I found myself feeling more anxious than excited. Not about the party itself, but about that performance. It was a reminder of how much I'd kept hidden from my own family, and of the delicate balance we maintained to keep the peace. The party was in full swing, laughter and chatter filling our backyard, transformed for the night into a slice of celebration. James was mingling, playing the host with an easy charm that made me fall for him all over again every time I saw it. Lily, dolled up in a dress that sparkled under the fairy lights, was buzzing with excitement and nerves about her upcoming performance. I was fussing over the last-minute details when Eleanor made her grand entrance, draped in elegance but with that ever-present air of scrutiny. Anna, dear, is everything set for our performance? She asked, her eyes darting around, assessing everything with a critical eye. Yep, all set. The piano's tuned, and the stage is waiting, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Inside, my stomach was a bundle of knots. This whole setup was Eleanor's show, but it was Lily I was worried about. As guests settled, Eleanor decided it was time. Let's not keep our audience waiting, she announced, herding a reluctant Lily towards the stage. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As Eleanor stepped onto the stage, her heel caught on a loose cable. Time slowed as she stumbled, a gasp escaping from the crowd. Instinctively, she reached out, trying to steady herself on the piano, but instead, she tumbled, landing awkwardly on her arm. The music halted, replaced by murmurs of concern. James rushed to his mother's side, his face etched with worry. Mom, are you all right? He asked, as I hovered nearby, unsure of what to do. Eleanor, ever the prideful matriarch, brushed off the concern with a strained smile. I'm fine, just a little mishap. The show must go on, she insisted, though her voice betrayed a hint of pain. James wasn't convinced. Maybe we should cancel the performance, Mom. You need to get that checked. But Eleanor wouldn't hear of it. Absolutely not. We've prepared for this, and we will perform, she said, her tone brooking no argument. I glanced at Lily, who looked more frightened than ever. I wanted to scoop her up and tell her she didn't have to go through with this, but Eleanor was already positioning her at the piano. The performance started, and it was clear from the first note that something was off. Eleanor's playing was hesitant, the fluid grace she usually possessed replaced by a stilted awkwardness. The pain from her fall was evident in every note she missed, every chord that came out wrong. A murmur ran through the assembled guests as the performance went on. It wasn't long before some couldn't hide their amusement, their whispers turning into barely suppressed chuckles. The sight of Eleanor, always so poised and in control, struggling to play basic arpeggios because of her injured arm was, I had to admit, a bit funny in a tragic sort of way. But my heart went out to Lily, caught in the middle of this farce, her eyes darting between the keys and her grandmother, a look of sheer panic on her face. The performance, meant to be the highlight of the evening, turned into a comedy of errors, with Eleanor's pride leading the charge. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for her. There she was, trying to maintain her dignity in front of an audience that found her predicament amusing. It was a humbling moment for someone who seldom found themselves anything less than perfect. As I watched Eleanor stumble away from the piano, her pride taking a hit right in front of everyone, I was torn. Part of me thought, well, it's about time she came down a peg or two. But then, seeing her trying to blink away those tears of frustration, my heart softened. She might be all sorts of difficult, but she didn't deserve to be humiliated like that. And Lily, my sweet girl, looked so upset by the whole ordeal, I couldn't bear it. Eleanor, her face a mask of disappointment mixed with pain, slowly moved aside. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't about to let the evening end on such a sour note. Not if I could help it. So, there I went, taking a seat at the piano beside Lily, who looked at me with wide, questioning eyes. Just follow my lead, I whispered to her, giving her a reassuring smile. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, curious, maybe even a bit skeptical. We started to play, and it was like magic. The notes just flowed, perfect and clear. For a few minutes, there was no Eleanor, no awkward tension, just me, Lily, and the music. I could hear the surprise in the room, the shift in the atmosphere as we hit our stride. The applause that followed was thunderous, especially from James, who looked like he might burst with pride. But it was Eleanor's reaction that caught me off guard. She was standing there, tears streaming down her face, but this time they were different. There was something like respect, maybe even a hint of regret, in her eyes. I had no idea you could play, she said, her voice soft, almost lost in the buzz of the room. A lot of things you don't know about me. I shot back, half teasing, half serious. It was a moment of triumph, sure, but it was also a bridge, a way to show her there was more to me than she'd ever given me credit for. Lily, ever the showman, took her little bow, her face lit up with a mix of relief and joy. And as the applause died down, I stayed seated at the piano, my fingers resting lightly on the keys, ready for the next piece. Wow, Anna, that was incredible. I had no idea, James said, his voice filled with wonder and something akin to disbelief. Eleanor cleared her throat, stepping closer, her gaze fixed on me. Anna, I must admit, that was quite a performance. You and Lily, you played beautifully together. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her concession. Thanks, Eleanor. Music's always been a big part of my life. Just never had the chance to show it off like this. The guests murmured their agreement, some still clapping softly, their smiles genuine and encouraging. It was a rare moment of unity, the usual tensions forgotten in the wake of our shared experience. Lily tugged at my sleeve, her earlier shyness replaced by excitement. Mom, can we play another one? Please? I looked down at her, her enthusiasm infectious. Sure, kiddo. What do you say we give them a little Beethoven? The mention of Beethoven caught Eleanor off guard, her interest piqued. Beethoven, you say? I didn't realize you were familiar with his work. There's a lot of things about me you're not familiar with, I shot back, not unkindly. I turned to the guests, who were watching our exchange with a mix of amusement and curiosity. Everyone, we hope you enjoy this next piece. It's one of our favorites. As Lily and I launched into the first few bars of Für Elise, a piece so familiar yet always capable of evoking deep emotions, the room settled into a hushed reverence. The music flowed from us, a testament to hours of practice and a shared love for the piano that I hadn't realized was so strong in my daughter. When the piece ended, the applause was louder, more assured. It was as if our performance had woven a thread of connection through everyone present, drawing us together in appreciation of something truly special. James came over, his pride evident. I think we might need to get a second piano at this rate, he joked, but I could tell he was seriously considering it. Eleanor approached again, this time her expression softer, more reflective. Anna, I was wrong about you. Your love for music, for our family, it's clear. I'm sorry for any harsh words I've said. I was taken aback by her apology, the sincerity in her voice unmistakable. Thank you, Eleanor. That means a lot coming from you. Maybe we can start fresh? She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I'd like that. Very much. The rest of the evening was a blur of laughter, conversation, and even more music. Lily and I played a few more pieces, each one drawing cheers and applause from our guests. It felt like a turning point, a bridge mended through the power of music and a shared moment of vulnerability. It's been a while since that unforgettable night when music changed everything between me and Eleanor, my once daunting mother-in-law. If someone had told me back then that we'd end up close, I would have laughed it off. But here we are, and I can hardly believe it myself. Eleanor softened a lot, especially when it comes to Lily's upbringing. She's not as rigid as she used to be, and I see a warmth in her I never knew existed. These days, we often find ourselves sitting side by side at the piano, our fingers dancing over the keys in perfect harmony. It's become our thing, playing together during family get-togethers or quiet evenings at home. Who would have thought? One evening, as we finished a particularly challenging piece, I turned to Eleanor, unable to hide my grin. Not bad for two amateurs, huh? Eleanor actually chuckled, a sound so rare and precious it still caught me off guard. Speak for yourself, Anna. I've always been a virtuoso in my own mind. Lily, who'd been listening, piped up from where she sat, a stack of music sheets in her lap. Grandma, you're the best teacher. But Mom's catching up. Eleanor's gaze softened as she looked at Lily, then back at me. We make a good team, don't we? Yeah, we do. I agreed, feeling a surge of pride. Not just in our music, but in how far we'd come, from cautious adversaries to partners in crime at the piano. James, ever the supportive husband and son, would often sit back with a contented smile, watching us. You three are something else, he'd say, and I knew he meant every word. Eleanor and I, we talk a lot more now. Not just about music, but about life, love, and everything in between. She's opened up about the challenges of raising her kids alone, and I've shared my fears and dreams for Lily. These conversations, once unimaginable, have become a cherished part of our relationship. Anna, Eleanor said one night, after Lily had gone to bed, I was too harsh on you before. You brought something special into this family. Hearing those words, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Thank you, Eleanor. That means the world to me. We've come a long way, Eleanor and I. From tension and misunderstanding to respect and genuine affection. It's not always perfect, but the progress we've made is undeniable. And much of it, we owe to those evenings at the piano, where, through the universal language of music, we found a way to understand each other. The day I moved in with Uncle John and Aunt Maria, my life took a sharp turn. Their house was nothing like the warm, loving home I'd lost. It was colder, stricter, a place where laughter seemed to echo with a hint of bitterness. Ellie, their daughter, met me with a stare that could freeze boiling water. Great, now we've got a charity case living with us, Ellie muttered under her breath as I lugged my suitcase into what would be my new room. Aunt Maria shot her a look. Ellie, that's enough. She's family, and we're doing the right thing. Uncle John, a man of few words, simply nodded. You'll follow our rules here, Ruth. We expect you to contribute like everyone else. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. I was just 11, trying to find my footing in a world that had suddenly turned upside down after my parents died in a car accident. The first few days were a blur of new rules and chores. Ellie made sure to remind me of my place at every turn. Why are you even here? You're not really one of us, she sneered one day as we washed dishes. Just a little orphan girl living off our charity. I clenched my jaw, focusing on the soapy water. I'm here because your parents took me in, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, and don't you forget it. You owe us, Ellie snapped back, splashing water in my direction. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie in bed, listening to the silence of the house, missing my parents more than ever. Tears were my only solace, but I never let Ellie or her parents hear me cry. I made a silent vow to myself, I would endure, no matter what. Helping with the housework became my escape. Aunt Maria was particular about how things were done, and I learned quickly to avoid her criticism. "You call this clean?" she'd often scold, pointing at a spot I'd missed on the floor. "Sorry, Aunt Maria. I'll do it again," I'd say, grabbing the mop and going over the spot until she was satisfied. Uncle John was a stern man, his words sparing but sharp. "We're not running a hotel here, Ruth. Pull your weight," he'd remind me, even though I was already doing more chores than Ellie. Ellie, for her part, never missed a chance to make my life harder. She'd hide my sewing supplies, knowing how much I loved to sew, then feign innocence when I couldn't find them. "Looking for these?" she'd taunt, holding my scissors just out of reach. "Maybe if you're nice to me, I'll give them back." But I never retaliated. I kept to myself, burying my hurt and focusing on my sewing. It was my one joy, the thread that connected me to happier times with my parents. I started with doll clothes, moving on to alter whatever old clothes I could find. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Life with Uncle John and Aunt Maria was a mixed bag. They provided a roof over my head, sure, but it was Ellie who made sure I never forgot I was different. Amid the coldness and the chores, I found my escape in a corner of my room with a needle, thread, and old fabrics that whispered promises of transformation. One evening, as I was turning a faded curtain into a skirt, Ellie barged into my room without knocking. "What are you doing with that old rag?" she sneered, her eyes scanning my makeshift sewing station. "Just making something new," I replied, keeping my focus on the fabric under my hands. I wasn't about to let her see how much her words stung. Ellie laughed, a harsh sound that filled the small space. "You think you're some kind of designer? Please. You'll always be wearing hand-me-downs and trash." I bit back a retort, choosing silence over fueling the fire. She shook her head, smirking, and left, leaving a trail of scorn in her wake. The next day at school, I wore the skirt. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I paired it with a simple top I'd altered, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. That's when Kelly, a girl from my class, noticed. "Hey, Ruth, that's a cool skirt. Did you get that downtown?" she asked, eyeing the pattern with genuine interest. I hesitated, then decided on the truth. "No, I made it myself." "Seriously? That's awesome. You've got talent," Kelly said, her words a balm to the sting of Ellie's mockery. Encouraged by Kelly's reaction, I started spending every spare moment sewing. My room became a sanctuary filled with fabric scraps and dreams stitched into reality. Each piece I created was a step away from the identity Ellie and her parents imposed on me. One Saturday, as I was cutting into a dress that Aunt Maria had declared too old, Uncle John walked in. "What's all this?" he grumbled, surveying the mess of fabrics and patterns scattered around. "I'm making something new to wear," I said, trying to keep my voice steady under his scrutiny. He picked up a piece of fabric, twisting it in his hands. "Seems like a waste of time. You should focus on your chores, not play dress-up." His words were like a slap, dismissing not just my passion, but my efforts to rise above my circumstances. "It's not a waste," I muttered, but he was already walking away, uninterested in my defense. Despite their disdain, I couldn't stop. Sewing became more than a hobby, it was my rebellion, my claim to an identity they couldn't touch. Each stitch was a word in the narrative I was writing for myself, one where I wasn't just the orphaned niece, but Ruth, the girl who could create beauty from neglect. Things took a sharp turn after I hit 18. Ellie got herself a shiny new car for her birthday, a sleek thing that made my heart sink every time it roared to life. Meanwhile, Uncle John and Aunt Maria suddenly upgraded their lives with fancy gadgets and furniture that seemed out of place in our modest home. It was clear they were living it up, while I was left figuring out how to stretch every penny. One day, as I was mulling over the idea of getting a job post-high school, Aunt Maria dropped a bombshell. "Your parents left you some money for college," she said nonchalantly, as if mentioning the weather. I was stunned. "Really? I had no idea." "Yeah, but there's a catch," Uncle John chimed in, his tone sharp. "You're staying local for college. It's safer, and we can keep an eye on you." My dream of leaving for a big city to study fashion design crumbled. But "No buts," Aunt Maria cut me off. "We've decided. You can thank us later." I swallowed my protests. Arguing was pointless. So, I enrolled in the local college, my dreams of fashion design barely hanging by a thread. Needing to support myself and save for the future, I landed a job as an assistant secretary at a law office nearby. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. "Look at you, all grown up and working," Ellie sneered one evening as I was sketching designs. "Still playing dress up, I see." "Better than playing spoiled brat," I retorted without looking up. My patience with her was wearing thin. She huffed, clearly annoyed, and stormed out. I couldn't help but smile a little. For once, I had the last word. Despite the setbacks, I didn't give up on fashion. Every evening, after work and classes, I'd dive into my world of sketches and fabrics, transforming Ellie's discarded clothes into pieces that felt like me. It was my rebellion, my way of holding on to the dream, even if it was stitched together from the leftovers of someone else's life. Working late again, Ruth, my coworker, Mike, asked one evening as he passed by my desk. "Yeah, got a project I'm passionate about," I replied, packing up my sketches discreetly. "Must be nice, having something you love doing," he said, a hint of envy in his voice. "It is," I admitted, feeling a surge of pride. "It's not much, but it's mine." Walking home that night, I felt a mix of emotions. Frustration, for sure, at the way my life was hemmed in by my guardian's decisions. But also determination. I might have been forced to stay local, but I wasn't going to let that define me or my future. The more time passed, the more I started to feel like I was living in a house of cards, about to crumble at any moment. Uncle John and Aunt Maria, who once lived as modestly as monks, were suddenly splurging like lottery winners. First, it was Aunt Maria flaunting a fur coat so pricey, it could have fed us for months. Then, Uncle John brought home a TV so big, you'd think we were running a cinema out of our living room. And Ellie, who never lifted a finger for work or study, was now flashing gadgets I'd only seen in glossy magazine ads. It didn't add up. I wasn't a genius at math, but even I knew our household budget couldn't magically stretch to cover luxury splurges. They were being dodgy about where all this cash was coming from, and it set my nerves on edge. One evening at dinner, with the new TV blaring some reality show in the background, I decided to poke the bear. "So, where's all this new stuff coming from?" "Last I checked, we weren't hitting the jackpot every week," I said, trying to keep my voice light, but my words came out sharper than I intended. Aunt Maria shot me a look, her eyes narrowing. "That's none of your business, young lady," she snapped, her tone icy. Uncle John, caught off guard, almost choked on his food. Coughing, he managed to say, "Well, I got a promotion at work." "Yeah, that's it. A big one." "Promotion, huh?" I pressed, not buying it for a second. Must have been one heck of a jump to start throwing money around like this. Ellie, sensing tension, quickly chimed in with her usual snark. "What's it to you, Ruth? Jealous much? Not all of us need to scrape by, you know." I clenched my fists under the table, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. "Just curious is all." Seems weird, doesn't it? Suddenly living like kings out of nowhere. The room went silent, the only sound coming from the TV's chatter. Uncle John and Aunt Maria exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Uncle John cleared his throat. "Let's just say we've been careful with our savings, all right? No need to worry your little head about it. Careful with savings? Right. I knew something was off. The dots weren't connecting, and their answers were as flimsy as a house of cards in a windstorm. That night, as I lay in bed, the pieces of the puzzle nagged at me. The fur coat, the TV, Ellie's gadgets, and the documents. Those endless documents they had me sign, always with the excuse that it was for benefits or some other vague reason. I trusted them, never bothering to read what I was signing. But lying there, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Could those signatures of mine be the source of their sudden wealth? The deception swirling around my guardian's sudden wealth weighed heavily on me, but amidst the chaos, a sliver of light shone through. Tom. He worked part-time at the law office, a law student with a sharp mind and a kind heart. Our connection was immediate, a bond formed over shared dreams and the mundane realities of office life. One afternoon, while organizing files, our hands brushed, sending a jolt of electricity through me. We locked eyes, and he smiled. "Ruth, you ever think about escaping this place?" he asked, his voice low. "All the time," I admitted, feeling a flush of warmth. "But it feels like I'm stuck in quicksand." He nodded, understanding. "Well, if you ever need a partner in crime, you know where to find me." It was a joke, but it sparked something between us, a flicker of rebellion against the constraints of our lives. Our secret rendezvous became the highlight of my days, stolen moments filled with laughter and dreams. But as our connection deepened, Aunt Maria grew suspicious. One evening, she cornered me in the kitchen. "I've seen you sneaking around with that boy from the office." "Don't think I haven't noticed," she hissed, her eyes boring into mine. I tried to keep my composure. "Tom's just a friend, Aunt Maria. Nothing to worry about." "A friend, huh? Don't play me for a fool, Ruth. You're not to see him again." "It's for your own good," she snapped, her tone leaving no room for argument. I was stunned. "You can't control who I see or what I feel. Tom's a good person." Aunt Maria's face hardened. "I won't have you ruining your future for some boy. You'll thank me one day." I bit my tongue, anger and frustration boiling inside. It was clear she wouldn't listen. From that moment, Tom and I knew we had to meet in secret, our love a forbidden flame that refused to be extinguished. "Looks like we're modern-day Romeo and Juliet," Tom joked one night as we huddled in the shadows of a park, far from prying eyes. "I guess that makes Aunt Maria the villain in our story," I replied, trying to smile, despite the bitterness in my heart. "We'll find a way out of this, Ruth. Together," Tom said, taking my hand. His determination was comforting, a beacon of hope in the darkness. But our secret meetings couldn't go unnoticed forever. Ellie, ever the spy, caught us one day and wasted no time in running back to Aunt Maria and Uncle John. The confrontation that followed was explosive. "You're grounded. No more job, no more college until you learn your place," Uncle John declared, his face red with anger. "You can't do this. You're not my jailers." I shot back, defiance rising in me. Aunt Maria's laugh was cold and sharp. "Oh, but we can, dear. You'll learn to obey, or you'll lose everything." The threat was real, and the stakes were higher than ever. In the dead of night, Tom and I made plans to fight back, to reclaim my inheritance and our freedom. "It's us against the world, Ruth. We'll expose their lies and build our own future," Tom whispered, his words a vow I clung to. It was a chilly Thursday evening, the kind where the wind seemed to whisper secrets as it passed. Tom and I were huddled in the dim light of his tiny apartment, the only place we felt safe from Aunt Maria and Uncle John's prying eyes. The documents I had secretly photographed lay spread out on the coffee table between us, a silent testament to the betrayal I was about to uncover. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Ruth?" Tom asked, his voice laced with concern. He knew the weight of what we might discover. I nodded, my heart hammering in my chest. "I need to know, no matter how bad it is." We started with the will of my parents, a document I had never seen before. As Tom read it aloud, the reality of their love for me, their hopes for my future, hit me hard. They had left me not just their savings, but also investments and properties, a legacy meant to secure my life. And there, in clear legal language, was the clause about my inheritance coming into full effect at 18. So, they've been lying to you, Ruth. All this time, Tom said, his voice tight with anger. But why? How could they just use me like this? The betrayal stung, a bitter pill to swallow. We dug deeper, examining the documents I had signed. Tom's legal knowledge helped unravel the complex web of deceit. Look here, he pointed out. By signing this, you basically allowed them access to your funds. They've been funneling your inheritance into their accounts. The realization hit me like a freight train. My trust, my loyalty, had been manipulated to fund their lavish lifestyle. I can't believe this. They told me it was all for benefits, for my college fund, I said, feeling naive and foolish. It's classic fraud, Ruth. And it's illegal. You have rights, Tom reassured me, his hand finding mine. The next steps were daunting. We discussed lawyers, legal battles, and the possibility of going public. The thought of facing Aunt Maria and Uncle John, exposing them for the frauds they were, made my stomach churn. We'll need evidence, solid proof that can't be dismissed, Tom said, already plotting our course of action. I was scared, more scared than I'd ever been, but the fire of justice burned within me. Let's do it. Let's expose them. I can't let them get away with this. The determination in my voice surprised even me. I was no longer the timid girl who had arrived at their doorstep, seeking refuge. I was a woman wronged, ready to claim what was rightfully mine. The plan was set. We would gather more evidence, consult with a lawyer Tom knew, and build a case that would stand up in court. It was going to be a long, hard fight, but I was ready. Ready to face the guardians who had become my oppressors, ready to reclaim my life and my future. The days leading up to the court date were a blur. Tom and I spent every moment poring over documents, meeting with our lawyer, Mr. Henderson, and preparing our case. The evidence was solid, but the thought of facing Aunt Maria and Uncle John in court made my stomach twist in knots. Remember, it's about the truth, Mr. Henderson reminded me as we sat in his cluttered office, papers strewn about. Stick to the facts, and we'll get through this. The day of reckoning arrived faster than I had hoped. The courtroom was cold, sterile, and filled with the murmurs of onlookers. Uncle John and Aunt Maria sat across from us, their faces stoic, betraying no sign of guilt. Ms. Thompson, can you confirm that you were unaware of the contents of the documents you were signing at the request of the defendants? The judge asked, his gaze fixed on me. Yes, Your Honor. I trusted them. I thought they were looking out for me, I replied, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. Aunt Maria's lawyer was slick, trying to paint me as an ungrateful niece, biting the hand that fed her. Isn't it true that the defendants provided you with a home and care after your parents' tragic demise? He asked, his tone dripping with insinuation. They did, but that doesn't give them the right to steal my inheritance, I shot back, refusing to be intimidated. The turning point came when Tom took the stand, presenting the financial records we had uncovered. These documents clearly show the transfer of funds from Ms. Thompson's accounts to the defendants, immediately following her signature on the documents they presented to her. He explained, his confidence undercutting the defense's arguments. Aunt Maria and Uncle John squirmed in their seats, their facade finally cracking under the weight of evidence against them. After what felt like an eternity, the judge delivered his verdict. The evidence presented clearly demonstrates a breach of trust and fraudulent activity by the defendants. I hereby order the immediate restitution of all misappropriated funds to Ms. Thompson, along with appropriate penalties for the defendants. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, but all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. Justice had been served. Outside, the sun seemed brighter, the air fresher. You did it, Ruth. You stood up for yourself, Tom said, wrapping me in a hug. I couldn't have done it without you. I whispered, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. With my inheritance rightfully returned, I set my sights on the future. With my inheritance rightfully returned, I set my sights on the future. I started studying to be a designer, fulfilling my long-held dream. It was difficult, but interesting. And it's fair to myself. Years had flown by, turning pages filled with trials into chapters of triumph. My atelier, once just a dream woven from threads of hope and defiance, now stood as a testament to my journey. I had built a name for myself in the city, not just as a fashion designer, but as a symbol of resilience. One afternoon, as the autumn sun cast long shadows across my studio, Ellie barged in, her presence as unwelcome as a storm cloud. Time hadn't been kind to her, the arrogance still hung around her like a tattered cloak, but desperation had etched lines into her face. "Ruth, you gotta help me." She started without a greeting, her voice a mix of demand and despair. "I'm in deep, really deep. I need money." I paused, the shock of her audacity giving way to a cold sense of inevitability. "Ellie, I can't just hand you money. But I can offer you a job. Work for it, earn it." Her reaction was immediate and volcanic. "A job? Are you kidding me?" "I don't need a job, Ruth, I need cash, and I need it now," she spat, her eyes blazing with anger. I stood my ground, feeling the weight of our shared past heavy between us. "I won't fuel your mistakes, Ellie. A job is all I'm offering. Take it or leave it." Her fury boiled over. "You think you're better than me now, huh? Just because you play dress up for a living?" she sneered, her words laced with venom. "No, Ellie. I worked hard for everything I have. I'm offering you a chance to do the same," I replied, my voice steady. Ellie's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. "I don't need your charity or your lectures. You'll regret this, Ruth." As she stormed out, I felt a wave of sadness for what we both had lost, but also a deep, unshakable conviction in my choices. I had learned the hard way that no one could save you if you weren't willing to save yourself. Weeks later, news trickled down to me that Aunt Maria and Uncle John's house had been sold off to cover debts. Ellie had vanished, chasing after windfalls that would never come. The cycle of choices and consequences had come full circle. Sitting in my studio, surrounded by the vibrant chaos of creativity, I reflected on the journey. From the ashes of a broken past, I had carved out a space where dreams took shape, where resilience was the fabric of success. Tom, now my husband and partner in every sense, placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" I smiled, leaning into his strength. "Yeah, I am. It's just, life's funny, isn't it? How it all turns out." He squeezed my shoulder gently. "It's not just life, Ruth. It's you. You made this happen. You turned the odds into your masterpiece." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, I realized he was right. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a whole new book, one where the pages were filled with the colors of hard-won joy and the quiet strength of redemption. My name's Sarah, 51 years young, or old, depending on the kind of day I'm having. If you're expecting a tale of whimsy or a life that's been anything but ordinary, you might as well grab a seat because it's been one heck of a ride. Let's start with the heart of my world, Emily. My girl, my everything. Raising her on my lonesome wasn't part of the dream, you know? Her dad decided a fresh start was in order, across the globe, no less, leaving us high and dry. That man swapped us out like last season's wardrobe, and before I knew it, he had himself a shiny new family. So, there it was, just me and Em against the world. My days? They blurred into one long shift, juggling jobs like a circus act. The diner by day, the bar by night, and on good days, a bit of cleaning work squeezed in between. Sleep was a luxury, a fleeting visitor between shifts. But seeing Emily smile, hearing her laugh, that was the real paycheck. But bless her, she's 23 and still figuring out life's big puzzle. Jobs? She's had more than a few, but none stuck. It's the boss, Ma, he's a real piece of work. Or, I can't deal with customers, they're all insane. Excuses as colorful as a painter's palette. Each job ended with her back on our couch, phone in one hand, remote in the other. And me? I just couldn't stay mad at her. It's alright, something better will come along, I'd say, hiding the worry gnawing at my gut. Because that's what you do when you love someone, you wear the world's troubles so they don't have to. One particularly rough day, after a double shift that had me more bone than flesh, I came home to find Emily sprawled on the sofa, a mess of job application forms scattered around like confetti. Hey, Ma, she greeted without looking up, her attention glued to the TV screen. Hey, kiddo. Anything bite today? I asked, shedding my coat and the weight of the day. She shrugged, a gesture I knew all too well. Nah, it's all crap. Why bother? They don't want to pay a living wage anyway. I sighed, a mix of exhaustion and frustration brewing. We talked about this. You gotta start somewhere, right? Can't be picky in times like these. Whatever, Ma. It's easy for you to say. You're used to busting your back for peanuts, she fired back, her words sharp like a knife. That stung. Not gonna lie. But anger? It never had a place in our home. I bit back the retort simmering on my tongue and instead forced a smile. Maybe so, kiddo. But those peanuts kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. Someday, you'll understand that. Emily rolled her eyes, the universal sign of young adult disdain. Sure, Ma. I'm hitting the sack. Night. Watching her disappear into her room, a part of me ached. Ached for her to see the world not as an adversary, but as a challenge to be met head-on. Yet, there I was, picking up the scattered forms, tidying up the living remnants of her latest defeat. The thing about life is, just when you think you've got it all figured out, it throws you a curveball. And not the kind you can hit out of the park. No, I'm talking about the kind that hits you square in the chest and leaves you gasping for air. That's exactly what happened the day Emily decided to drop her little bombshell. It was a Tuesday, not that it matters, but I remember because Tuesdays were meatloaf nights. I was in the kitchen, elbows deep in ground beef, when Emily waltzed in, her face all lit up like a Christmas tree. Behind her trailed Alex, a guy I'd seen maybe once or twice before. I didn't have anything against him, but let's just say he wouldn't be my first pick for a son-in-law. Not that I was thinking about that kind of stuff, until I had to. Ma, guess what? Emily chirped, bouncing on her heels. I glanced over, eyebrow raised. You finally decided to clean your room? She rolled her eyes, a grin spreading across her face. Funny, Ma. No, better. Alex and I got married. You know that feeling when your heart skips a beat? Yeah, mine skipped, tripped, and fell flat on its face. Married? I echoed, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Alex stepped forward, a sheepish smile plastered on his face. Yeah, Mrs. S., we eloped last weekend. Surprise? Surprise was an understatement. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. Eloped? I repeated, still processing. And you're just telling me now? Emily's excitement dimmed a bit, replaced by a defensive edge. I knew you'd react like this, Ma. That's why we didn't tell you before. But it's done. And we're happy, aren't we, Alex? Alex nodded, slipping an arm around her. Yeah, totally happy. I put down the mixing spoon, wiping my hands on my apron. This was a conversation that needed my full attention. And where, pray tell, do you plan on living? I asked, already dreading the answer. Well, here, Emily said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. With you, Ma. Where else? Where else indeed? I took a deep breath, trying to tamp down the rising tide of frustration. Emily, honey, you're married now. Don't you think it's time you, I don't know, started your own life? Somewhere that's not here? Her face fell. Ma, you know we can't afford that. Alex's job doesn't pay much, and I'm still looking. Looking. Right. The eternal job hunter. I looked from her to Alex, who seemed content to let Emily do the talking. Something about the set of his jaw irked me, the way he seemed to assume this was all fine and dandy. Look. I started, trying to keep my voice even. I love you, Emily. You know I do. But this isn't what I wanted for you. For either of us. Emily's response was swift and sharp. What, Ma? You didn't want me to be happy? Is that it? No, of course not, I countered, feeling the conversation slip away from me. I thought you'd want more. That you'd strive for more. More what, Ma? More work? More nights alone? Thanks, but I'll pass on that. The conversation spiraled from there, each word more heated than the last. Alex tried to chime in, but he might as well have been a fly buzzing around a hurricane. This was between me and my daughter, and it was clear neither of us was going to budge. In the end, we called a truce, but the air remained thick with unsaid things. Alex moved in the next day, his belongings taking up space in a home that suddenly felt too small. I retreated into myself, wondering where I'd gone wrong, how my little girl had grown so far from the dreams I'd had for her. The day I found out about the cancer was the day my world flipped on its head. I'd been feeling off for a while, but cancer? That word felt like a freight train hitting me at full speed. The doctor was gentle about it, but the words still stung. It's treatable, he said. But you'll need to focus on your health, maybe even take some time off work. Work. My lifeline, the thing that kept us afloat all these years, and now I was being told to step back from it. I headed home, the weight of the diagnosis crushing me. The house was quiet when I got in, too quiet. Emily was in her room, probably lost in her phone, and Alex, well, Alex was Alex, doing whatever it was that he did. I needed them, needed their support, so I called them both to the living room. Guys, we need to talk. I started, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound strong. Emily looked up, her eyes wide. What's up, Ma? You look like hell. I sighed, not sure how to say the words. I've got cancer. I blurted out, the words feeling alien and heavy on my tongue. There was a moment of silence, and then Emily's face changed, but not in the way I'd hoped. Cancer? But, what does that mean, for, us? Her question caught me off guard. Well, it means I'll be going through treatment, and I had to quit my job to focus on getting better. The room went cold. Alex, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke up. Quit your job? How are we supposed to live, then? My job barely covers my stuff. I stared at them, disbelief washing over me. This was their concern? Not my health, not the battle I was about to face, but their comfort? Emily chimed in, her tone sharp. Yeah, Ma, how could you not think about us? What are we supposed to do now? The disappointment hit me like a second diagnosis. My own daughter, the girl I'd raised, sacrificed for, was more worried about her financial comfort than my fight for life. I thought you'd be worried about me, about what I'm going through, I said, my voice breaking. Well, of course, we're worried, Emily said, her voice softening just a touch. But we've got to be practical here. You can't just quit and expect everything to be okay. Alex nodded in agreement. Yeah, it's not just about you anymore. We've got to think about the future. The future. Their future apparently didn't include the possibility of me not being in it. I realized then what I'd done, or rather, what I hadn't done. I'd raised a daughter who saw me not as a person fighting for her life, but as a means to an end, a financial safety net. After weeks of harsh treatments, the hospital finally sent me home. I was a shell of my former self, hollowed out by radiation and chemotherapy, clinging to the hope that within the familiar walls of my home, I might find some solace, some shred of normalcy. But what greeted me was far from the support and care I had envisioned. The air at home had shifted, it was thick with tension, heavy with unspoken resentments. My daughter, Emily, and her husband, Alex, had taken to treating me more like an inconvenient guest than family. Their patience wore thin at the slightest provocation, their words sharp and cutting. One day, trying to make myself a cup of tea, my hands betrayed me, trembling from the weakness that had become my constant companion. The mug slipped, shattering on the floor with a sound that seemed to echo my own fragility. The crash brought Emily storming into the kitchen. "Seriously, Ma? Can't you do anything right? Look at this mess." Her words were like daggers, and I stood there, mute, the shards of the broken mug mirroring the pieces of my heart. "I'm sorry, Em. I didn't mean to." My apology was cut short by Alex's voice, barely a whisper yet loud enough to carry his disdain. "How tired you are, you sick old woman." Their words, sharp and unforgiving, were a far cry from the care I had hoped for, the love I thought we shared. Each day was a battle, not against the cancer that ravaged my body, but against the coldness that had taken root in my own home. I moved through the days and a days, my every action, every sound, seemingly an annoyance to them. Asking for help became an exercise in humiliation. "Em, could you help me up?" I'd ask, reaching out for support. The response was always the same, a huff of irritation, a reminder of her own priorities. "And so there are plenty of things to do, and you too," she'd snap, leaving me to fend for myself. Night after night, I cried myself to sleep, the sound of my sobs a solitary lament in the silence of the house. I was a burden, a nuisance in my own home, my presence an unwelcome reminder of the fragility of life. Due to constant stress, my health deteriorated, and I was admitted to the room again. After weeks of silence and solitude in the hospital, the last person I expected to see was Emily. Her visits had become as rare as a cool breeze in a heat wave, and yet, there she was, standing at the foot of my hospital bed, looking every bit as uncomfortable as I felt surprised. "Hey, Ma," she started, avoiding my gaze. "How you feeling?" The casualness of her question, as if she'd been by my side all along, stung. "Been better," I replied, my voice raspy from disuse. "What brings you here, Em? Finally decided to check on your old mother?" She fidgeted, looking anywhere but at me. "Yeah, well, there's something we need to talk about. It's about the house." The house. My sanctuary, the only legacy my grandmother left me, and our only real home. A lump formed in my throat. "What about it?" Emily finally met my gaze, her eyes hard. "Alex and we've been talking, and we think it's best if you transfer the house to us. Legally, I mean." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Transfer the house? To you and Alex? Why on earth would I do that?" She crossed her arms, her discomfort replaced by defiance. "Because, Ma, it's practical. Alex is sick of living there, like he's some sort of freeloader. We want to own it, make it ours. It's not like you're going to be around forever, anyway." Her words felt like a slap. The audacity, the sheer insensitivity. My own daughter, viewing my home, my life, as nothing more than a transaction to secure her future comfort. "You think I'm just going to hand over everything because your husband doesn't like feeling like a guest? In my own house? It's not just that, Ma. It makes sense. You're here, sick, and who knows for how long. We're thinking about the future." "The future?" I echoed, incredulous. "And what about my future, Emily? Did you ever stop to think about that? Or is it just about what you and Alex want?" She sighed, a sound of frustration and impatience. "You're being unreasonable, Ma. We're just trying to be practical here." "Practical?" I shot back, anger and hurt swirling inside me. "You're talking about my home like it's a prize to be won. I worked hard for that house, kept it through everything. And you, my own daughter, you come here, not to see how I'm doing, not to offer comfort or support, but to ask me to give up my home? For what? So you can feel more secure in your marriage? Emily looked away. I thought you'd understand, Ma. But I can see you're just too selfish to see the bigger picture. Selfish? The accusation was a bitter pill to swallow. My whole life, I'd given everything to Emily, sacrificed so much, and now, in my time of need, this was how she saw me? Understanding has nothing to do with it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. This is about respect, about family. And right now, I don't know if I even recognize you, Emily. Without another word, she turned and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts, my pain, and a heart heavier than it had been before. Lying in the sterile silence of the hospital room, the buzzing of my phone felt like a lifeline to the outside world. When I saw it was Janice, my friend who's been in real estate since we were in high school, my heart skipped a beat. She never called without good reason. Hey, Janice. What's up? I tried to keep my voice steady, despite the dread settling in my stomach. Sarah, I don't know how to say this, but I was at the office today, and I saw a listing. It's your house, Sarah. Emily and that husband of hers are trying to sell it. The room spun. What? That can't be right. My house? Are you sure? As sure as I'm standing here. I thought it was a mistake, but I checked the documents myself. They've forged your signature, Sarah. It's listed under their names now. Anger and disbelief churned inside me. But, how could they? I never gave them any permission. This has to be illegal. It is, Sarah. You need to act fast. I knew she was right. My next call was to Mike, an old friend from college who ended up becoming a lawyer. Explaining the situation left me feeling exposed and vulnerable, but Mike's calm demeanor was a small comfort. Sarah, this is serious. We need to file for an injunction immediately to stop the sale. I'll need every piece of documentation you have on the house. We can argue forgery and undue influence, but we have to move quickly. Okay, Mike. I'll get you everything. I can't believe Emily would do this to me. To her own mother. It's unfortunate, but let's focus on protecting what's yours. I'll start the paperwork. Hang tight, Sarah. Hanging up, I was enveloped by a profound sense of betrayal. My own daughter, scheming behind my back to steal the only thing I had left from my grandmother. The thought was suffocating. Days passed in a blur of legal documents and phone calls. Mike was a godsend, navigating the legal maze with a precision that gave me hope. Meanwhile, I couldn't bring myself to confront Emily, not yet. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. For days, I interacted with Emily and Alex as if all was well, all the while coordinating with Mike to build our case. Their casualness around me, the way they dodged my gaze, only fueled my resolve. I had to protect what was rightfully mine. When Emily came to visit, feigning concern, I had to stifle a scoff. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. How are you holding up? Her words were hollow, and I played along. I've been better, Em. But I'm hanging in there. How's things at home? I prodded, curious if she'd slip up. Good, good. Alex and I are just, keeping busy. The evasion in her voice was palpable. The conversation danced around the elephant in the room, both of us playing our parts in a twisted performance. After she left, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow for the relationship we once had. But this betrayal? It was a line crossed, and there was no turning back. Mike called later with updates. We're all set, Sarah. You ready for this? More than ever, Mike. Let's do it. As I lay in my hospital bed, staring at the sterile ceiling, I couldn't help but marvel at the situation. My own daughter, plotting against me, and here I was, about to turn the tables. Released from the hospital for a bit, I have started to fulfill my plan. Janice was in on it too. She helped me set it up so I'd show up at my own house, pretending to be interested in buying it. The thought alone had my heart racing with a mix of nerves and a strange sense of excitement. I arrived at the house, dressed differently, hoping Emily and Alex wouldn't recognize me right off the bat. The moment they opened the door, their faces went from eager to sell to outright horror. It was almost comical, seeing them scramble to make sense of what was happening. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Emily stammered, her face pale. "Thought I'd take a look at my own house, considering it's up for sale and all." "Nice listing, by the way," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Alex, ever the smooth talker, tried to recover. "Sarah, look, this is just a big misunderstanding. Let's talk about this." "Misunderstanding?" I scoffed. "Forging my signature and trying to sell my house is a bit more than that, don't you think?" Without another word, I stepped outside and called the police. As I explained the situation, I watched Emily and Alex from the window, their expressions a mix of fear and disbelief. When the police arrived, Emily and Alex were taken away in handcuffs. Their pleas and cries echoed down the street, but my heart was hardened against them. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too fresh. After the dust settled, the quiet in my house was both eerie and soothing. It was just me now, alone with the echoes of a life that once was. The days melded into one another as I focused on my health, on healing not just my body, but my battered heart as well. Miraculously, my health began to turn a corner. The cancer that once seemed like a death sentence slowly retreated into the shadows, giving me a new lease on life. The trial of Emily and Alex was a spectacle, one I attended with a heavy heart. Watching them, so small and defeated in the courtroom, stirred something in me, but it wasn't enough to overcome the betrayal. They pleaded, tears streaming down their faces, begging for my forgiveness. But forgiveness was a river that had run dry. The court handed down a modest sentence for their crimes, but no punishment could right the wrongs they'd done. Word got around, as it always does in small towns. Some folks shook their heads, sking at my hard-heartedness, unable to understand how I could turn my back on my own flesh and blood. But most knew the pain of betrayal, and they stood by me, offering nods of understanding and silent support. It's funny, really, how something so earth-shattering can shift your perspective. I used to care so much about what people thought, about being the perfect mother, the perfect neighbor. But life has a way of teaching you that perfection is a facade, and approval is a fickle friend. One afternoon, as I sat on my porch, basking in the solitude, Janice stopped by, her presence a welcome break in the monotony. "Sarah, you're looking better every day," she said, taking the seat beside me. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached deep into my weary soul. "Feeling it, too. It's funny how peace can heal you in ways medicine can't." Janice nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "Not everyone agrees with your choices, you know. But I think you're one of the bravest people I know." I let out a chuckle, a sound tinged with sadness and wisdom born of pain. "Brave? No, I wouldn't say that. Just tired. Tired of bending until I break. Now, I'm just living for me, and if that's brave, then so be it." Janice squeezed my hand, a silent show of solidarity. "Living for yourself is all any of us can do, Sarah. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing a damn fine job at it." As she left, her words lingered in the air like a benediction. I turned my face to the sky, letting the warmth of the sun seep into my bones. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something like hope, like joy. So, I live. I live for the quiet mornings and the peaceful nights. I live for the friends who stood by me and for the strength I found in solitude. I live with the knowledge that not everyone will understand my journey, and that's okay. Because at the end of the day, it's my journey, and mine alone. I'm Ava, 33, knee-deep in the world of web design, and married to Mark, a guy who could charm the socks off anyone with his goofy smile. We met back in college, at some dingy bar where the music was too loud, and the drinks were cheap. I was trying to drown my exam stress in a pint of the most watered-down beer you could imagine when Mark sidled up, all confidence and bad pickup lines. "You look like you've lost your last friend, can I apply for the position?" he had said, and despite the cheesiness, I laughed. That laugh sealed our fate. Fast forward through years of cramped apartments, late-night takeouts, and dreams bigger than our paychecks, we tied the knot, ready to start a family. But, as it turned out, dreaming was the easy part. Years went by with no baby in sight. Every negative test felt like a punch in the gut, and the silence in our home grew louder with each passing month. Mark tried to keep things light, always the joker, but I saw the strain behind his eyes. "Hey, we still got each other, right? Me, you, and this invisible baby makes 3. He'd jest, trying to wrap me in a hug as I stared off into space, wondering why something that came so easily to others was out of our reach. One chilly morning, feeling off and a bit queasy, I called in sick. Alone, with Mark off to work, I found myself staring at a pregnancy test in the bathroom. "What the heck?" I muttered to myself, the words echoing off the tiles. The silence of waiting was suffocating, and when those 2 little lines appeared, I couldn't breathe. "No freaking way," I whispered, my heart slamming against my ribs. I was still staring at the test, disbelief and joy warring in my chest, when Mark came home. He found me on the sofa, the test clutched in my hand like some precious talisman. "What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, dropping his keys and coming over. We're pregnant," I managed, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. He froze, his eyes flicking down to the test and then back up to meet mine. "Are you shitting me?" he blurted out, the shock on his face mirroring my own feelings. "No, I'm not," I said, a laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. "I'm not shitting you." The moment stretched out between us, filled with a wild, disbelieving joy. Then, Mark scooped me up, twirling me around like we were in some kind of movie. "I'm gonna be a dad," he yelled, laughing, his usual reserve lost in the moment. The next day, he came home with a small box, wrapped clumsily in shiny paper. "For you," he said, a shy grin on his face. Inside was a pair of earrings, mother of pearl, shimmering softly. They were beautiful, unusual, and very noticeable. "To celebrate our little miracle," he said, his voice thick. I touched the earrings, then reached up to kiss him. "Thank you," I whispered, my eyes filling with tears. Not just for the gift, but for this moment, for us, for everything we had endured to get here. Mark, always the one to break a sentimental moment with humor, winked and said, "Now, don't go saying I never give you anything nice." Those earrings became my talisman, a symbol of our unexpected joy, a reminder of the day everything changed. After the initial shock and joy, reality set in. Pregnancy wasn't the glowing experience I'd been sold by every happy family photo and movie. It was hard, really hard. Morning sickness should have been called all-day sickness. I was a web designer by trade, glued to my screen, but now even the faint glow made me queasy. Mark was as supportive as he could be, but there's only so much understanding a guy can have when he's not the one turning into a human barf machine. "Babe, can you try working from the bed? Maybe it'll help," he suggested one evening, finding me hunched over the trash can in our tiny office. I shot him a look, half irritated, half grateful for his clumsy attempts at problem solving. "Yeah, 'cause coding while lying down is peak efficiency," I snapped, immediately regretting my sharpness. "Sorry, it's just, this is tough." As the weeks trudged on, my body became a foreign entity. I gained weight, my back ached constantly, and I developed a weird aversion to the smell of coffee, which used to be my morning lifeline. Mark tried to help by switching to tea, but he wasn't happy. "This is like drinking sad water," he complained one morning, staring mournfully at his mug. "I'd kill for a cup of sad water that didn't make me want to hurl," I retorted, sipping ginger tea that did nothing for my nausea but was supposed to be good for me. Work became my refuge, the one place I felt some control, even as my body rebelled. My manager, seeing my struggle, offered me the chance to work remotely. "Take care of yourself, Ava. We need you at your best, not at your breaking point," she advised over a video call, her face a pixelated mask of concern. "Thanks, I'll try not to code any bugs into the system along with the baby," I joked, grateful for her understanding. Mark was thrilled when I told him about the remote work arrangement. "That's fantastic. You can barf in the comfort of our home now," he said, wrapping me in a careful hug. "Yeah, the glamour is non-stop," I replied dryly, leaning into his warmth. But as the months wore on, the challenges only grew. Every appointment, every ultrasound, was a mix of terror and excitement. Mark was a rock, holding my hand, making bad jokes to the doctors, and promising over and over that he'd be there, no matter what. But as much as Mark was there for me, I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. My body was doing something miraculous, sure, but it felt more like an alien takeover. I envied women who breezed through pregnancy, who glowed and thrived while I barely survived. One particularly hard day, after a night of no sleep and too much heartburn, I broke down. "I don't know how I'm supposed to do this, Mark. How do women do this more than once? I feel like I'm falling apart." Mark, ever my rock, pulled me close, stroking my hair back from my tear-streaked face. Hey, we'll get through this. You're the strongest person I know. And remember, at the end of this, we get to meet our little alien overlord. That's got to be worth all the sad water and barf, right?" I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. "Yeah, I guess it is." That was our life now, a series of tough days brightened by moments of humor and love. Despite the difficulties, despite the fear and the pain, we were in it together, waiting for the day our lives would change forever. And in those hard, dark moments, that was enough to keep me going. After the baby came, I thought we'd be living in some kind of bliss. But, let me tell you, it was anything but. Our little bundle of joy? More like a tiny tyrant who refused to sleep. Night after night, it was just me, pacing the floor, trying every trick in the book to get him to settle. "Mark? Useless. I've got work in the morning," he'd grumble from under the pillows, as if I was heading off to a spa day instead of logging into my own mountain of work with a side of zombie-like exhaustion. "Great, 'cause apparently I don't work, right?" I'd snap back, bitterness creeping into my voice. It wasn't like my job just paused because I had a baby. Then, just when I thought we were getting the hang of it, life threw another curveball. I was pregnant again. The shock of it nearly bowled me over. "This can't be happening," I whispered to myself, staring down at the test. 2 kids under 2? How were we going to manage? Mark's reaction? "This is great news." He beamed, clearly not the one who'd have to push another human out of his body or juggle meetings with morning sickness. "Great? Mark, we're barely hanging on as it is," I retorted, my stress levels skyrocketing. "We'll manage." "We always do," he said, but his words felt hollow. Easy for him to say. His parents, Diane and Jack, bless them, swooped in like some kind of cavalry. They'd drive in from out of town, armed with casseroles and an eagerness to help. "You kids need a break," they'd insist, taking over with a competence that left me both grateful and a little resentful. Why couldn't it be this easy for us? When our daughter arrived, all those fears and frustrations seemed to melt away, at least for a little while. Holding her, everything just fit. Like she was the piece of our family puzzle we didn't know was missing. "Hello, beautiful," I whispered, tears of joy replacing those of exhaustion. But the reality was, we were in over our heads. Mark was over the moon about our daughter, sure, but his solution to our chaos was to dive even deeper into work. "We need the money," he'd say, a defense that was getting old. "More than we need you?" I'd counter, watching the gap between us grow wider with every late night and missed dinner. His parents became our lifeline, filling in the gaps, supporting us when we were too stubborn to admit we needed it. It was a weird mix of gratitude and guilt, relying on them so much. In those early days, staring down at my daughter's face, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. But as the sleepless nights stacked up and Mark's presence became more and more like a guest appearance, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were drifting further apart. "Look at her, Mark. She's perfect," I'd say during one of his rare moments at home, hoping to bridge the gap between us. "Yeah, she is," he'd agree, but his eyes were always on the clock, his mind elsewhere. After our second kid came into the picture, things didn't magically get easier like I hoped. Between the sleepless nights and trying to keep up with work, I noticed the pounds piling on. It wasn't just the baby weight anymore, it was stress, lack of sleep, and grabbing whatever I could eat during a rare moment of peace. Mark? He seemed more distant than ever. Where we used to crash on the couch together, exhausted but together, now there was just this cold space. I told myself it was just a phase, that we'd get back on track soon. But deep down, I was worried. His work became his excuse for everything. Late nights, weekends, even business trips that seemed to pop up out of nowhere. Meanwhile, I was killing it at work, somehow managing to juggle deadlines and diapers. The kids, bless them, were turning out to be my little motivators. Seeing them thrive, especially after I managed to get them into a decent private kindergarten, gave me a weird sense of accomplishment. But Mark and I? We were like ships passing in the night. And when he finally did drop his bombshell, it hurt like hell. "You've let yourself go," he said one night, out of the blue. No lead up, no gentleness, just those words, cutting deep. I was stunned. "Excuse me?" He shrugged, as if he'd just commented on the weather. "You're not. I'm just not attracted to you anymore." It felt like a punch to the gut. Here I was, trying to hold everything together, and this was what I got. Tears stung my eyes, but I was too proud to let them fall in front of him. "So, what? You're just giving up on us?" He didn't even have the decency to look conflicted. "I don't know, Ava. It's just how I feel." That night, I cried myself to sleep, not sure how we'd gotten to this point. But by morning, I was done feeling sorry for myself. I decided to take control, for me and for our kids. I started eating better, joined a gym, and threw myself into my workouts with a vengeance. Mark's reaction? If you could call it that, was a big fat nothing. He noticed, sure, but he didn't care. Not really. He was too caught up in his own world, treating the kids like they were more of a burden than a blessing. "We should have thought this through," he'd say, casting a cold eye over the chaos of toys and laughter. I bit back the sharper retorts that came to mind. Arguing wouldn't change how he felt, but I couldn't help but wonder when he'd become this person, so distant from the man I'd married. Despite it all, I pressed on. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where I could shed the weight and the worries. Slowly, I started to see progress, feeling stronger, more like myself than I had in years. But as I changed, Mark stayed the same. Indifferent. Distant. It was like we were living separate lives under the same roof. I missed him, or at least, I missed the idea of him, of us. Our wedding anniversary was rolling around, a day that used to mean champagne toasts and stolen kisses. This year, though, it felt more like a reminder of everything that had gone sideways between Mark and me. But I'm a fighter, always have been. So, I cooked up a plan to maybe, just maybe, salvage whatever was left of us. I called Mark during one of his rare breaks at work. "Hey, our anniversary's coming up. Thought maybe we could do something special," I ventured, heart hammering. There was a pause, long enough for me to regret bringing it up. "Sure, Ava. What did you have in mind?" His voice was flat, distracted. I pressed on, nerves be damned. "How about a weekend getaway? Just us, no kids, no distractions." "Sounds expensive," was his immediate response, and I could almost hear his eyebrows raising in skepticism. I bit back a sigh. "I found a deal. It'll be nice, Mark. Like old times." He was silent for a moment. "All right, book it. But it's your show, Ava. I'm swamped here." Not exactly the enthusiastic partner I was hoping for, but I'd take it. I went all in, booking a cozy hotel room and arranging for his parents to watch the kids. I needed, this weekend to be a turning point for us. The day before our trip, I laid out the dress I'd bought especially for the occasion. I tried to find the mother-of-pearl earrings that Mark gave me, but they were missing somewhere. It's okay, I thought, because everything else is ready. I waited for Mark at the hotel, anticipation turning to anxiety as the hours ticked by. My phone was silent, his side of the bed untouched. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I called him, my voice shaking. "Mark, where are you?" "You're late." "Look, Ava. I'm not coming," he said, and just like that, my fragile hope shattered. "What do you mean you're not coming?" "It's our anniversary, Mark." I was on my feet now, pacing the room. He sighed, a sound that felt like a slap. I can't do this, Ava. Pretend everything's okay. I'm sorry." The world spun. "So that's it? You're giving up on us?" My voice broke, the hurt too raw, too deep. "I don't know what else to do," he admitted, and the finality in his voice was a blow I wasn't prepared for. I hung up, numb. The night stretched on, endless and empty. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every second was a reminder of the gaping chasm between us, of the love we'd lost somewhere along the way. The next morning, I made a decision. If Mark had given up, fine. But I wouldn't let this break me. I spent the day at the hotel spa, walked along the beach, and dined alone, surrounded by couples. It was both liberating and profoundly sad. Returning home, I braced myself to face Mark, to confront the ruins of our marriage. But the house was quiet, too quiet. His parents greeted me with confusion and concern. "Where's Mark?" they asked, echoing the hollow ache in my heart. I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I didn't know where my husband was, physically or emotionally. Our anniversary, once a celebration of us, had turned into a stark, painful milestone marking the end of us. In that moment, I knew things couldn't go on like this. The distance, the silence, the pain, it was too much. I needed more, deserved more. It was time for a change, time to face the future, whatever it might hold, head on. But first, I needed to find those earrings, the last link to a time when love, not loneliness, filled our home. They were gone, just like the man who'd given them to me. And with that realization, the last piece of my broken heart finally gave way. The next few days were a blur of routine, taking care of the kids, working, and the constant, nagging thought of Mark's absence. It wasn't until I was out in the yard with the kids that the piece of the puzzle I wasn't even aware was missing fell right into my lap, or, more accurately, walked right up to my fence. It was our neighbor, Jenny, young and always friendly, but I hadn't really spoken to her since the kids came. Today, she was all smiles, waving at the kids. That's when I saw them, the earrings. My earrings. The mother-of-pearl ones Mark had given me, shimmering in the sunlight as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Nice earrings," I said, trying to keep my voice steady but feeling the sting of betrayal. Jenny touched one ear self-consciously. "Oh, these? They were a gift from someone special." She stumbled over her words, her face flushing. "Someone special, huh?" I couldn't hide my skepticism. "They look a lot like a pair I used to love. Went missing recently." The conversation was awkward, full of half-truths and dodged looks. It was clear there was something she wasn't saying. Later that evening, I confronted Mark. "We need to talk," I started, my voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "What's up?" He tried to sound casual, but I could see the tension in his posture. "It's over, Mark. I'm filing for divorce," I said without preamble, watching his reaction closely. He blinked, taken aback. "What? Why?" "Don't play dumb. I know about Jenny. The earrings, Mark. And everything else." I pressed on, feeling a mix of anger and heartbreak. For a moment, he looked genuinely shocked. But then, his expression shifted to something darker. He laughed, a harsh, angry sound. "So, you found out?" "Yes, I've been seeing Jenny. Gave her those earrings, because I wanted to. I don't care about us anymore, Ava." His words were like a knife. But I was prepared. "I want you out, Mark. And I expect financial compensation for your adventures." He exploded at that. "Compensation? You won't get a dime from me." That's when I played my final card. "Actually, I recorded our conversation just now. Your confession. It'll be more than enough for court." Mark's anger turned to disbelief, then fear. "You can't do that." "I just did," I said, the finality in my voice marking the end of our marriage and the beginning of my fight for justice. After I decided to file for divorce, things moved quickly. Armed with the evidence of Mark's infidelity, I felt a grim satisfaction knowing I had the upper hand. The court didn't hesitate. They saw right through Mark's excuses and awarded me financial compensation and alimony for the kids. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it felt significant. Mark's parents, surprisingly, came out firmly on my side. It was a bitter pill for Mark, realizing he'd lost not just his marriage, but the support of his family too. One afternoon, while the kids played in the yard, Mark's mom, Diane, and I sat down for a rare moment of quiet. "We're so sorry, dear," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "We never raised him to be this way." I nodded, not sure what to say. The betrayal still stung, but seeing them stand by me meant more than I could express. "I appreciate you both. The kids love having you around." Diane reached over and squeezed my hand. "They're our grandkids. We'd do anything for them. And for you. You're more of a daughter to us now than ever." Life after the divorce wasn't easy, but it was mine. The house felt emptier, yet somehow fuller too. Full of possibility, of new beginnings. The kids adapted, resilient as ever, finding joy in the simplest moments. And me? I threw myself into work and motherhood, determined to build a bright future for us. One day, I was at the park with the kids, watching them play, their laughter a balm to my soul, when Diane joined me on the bench. "You're doing an amazing job, Ava," she said, her tone sincere. "Thanks, Diane. It means a lot, coming from you." "We miss you guys when you're not around," I replied, grateful for her and her husband's unwavering support. "We wouldn't be anywhere else. Those kids, and you, are our family, no matter what Mark has done," she stated firmly. The conversation shifted to work, to the kids' latest antics, to the future. It was comforting, this new normal we'd established. A testament to the fact that family isn't always defined by blood, but by the bonds you build. As the months passed, I found strength I didn't know I had. The gym became a regular escape, not just for my physical health, but for my mental well-being too. My body grew stronger, and with it, my confidence. Then, one unexpected afternoon, I ran into Mark at a local cafe. The man sitting across from me was a stranger in many ways, worn down by his choices. "Ava, you look great," he said, almost in awe. I nodded, polite but distant. "Thanks, Mark. How have you been?" "Struggling," he admitted. "Listen, I've been thinking, maybe we could start over?" "I've changed, Ava." The words hung in the air, a tempting offer to rewind time. But looking at him, I realized I didn't want to go back. I had moved forward, built a life that was whole and happy without him. "Mark, I wish you well, I really do. But that part of my life is over. The kids and we're doing great. It's best we keep moving in our own directions," I said, my voice steady. He nodded, disappointment etched on his face. "I understand. I miss the family, you know?" "I know, but we're doing just fine. Take care of yourself, Mark," I replied, standing to leave. Walking away, I felt a surge of empowerment. The encounter, brief as it was, reinforced how far I'd come. I was no longer the woman who waited for her husband to come home. I was Ava, strong, independent, and thriving.